So, hi everyone. We're going to talk about the psychological theories of depression today, and specifically the good ones, by which I mean the ones. Obviously, there have been many theories of depression because there have been many scholars who've talked about it, but we are going to talk about. Um, we're going to talk about the most important ones, and the ones that are star marked are the ones that are most likely to be tested on most exams that we usually give. So, starting with the aggression turned inwards model. uh, right, so the aggression turned inwards model, it was first described by the person Carl Abraham, and this theory was then expanded upon by Sigmund Freud. Actually, Sigmund Freud was a senior to Carl Abraham. Carl Abraham was a disciple, but if someone asks who gave the theory, it was Carl Abraham, but then it was expanded upon by Sigmund Freud. So, to explain simply what this theory says is that, let's say you love someone, right? You admire someone, you want to be friends with someone. These can be friends, or let's say our parents. So, but unfortunately, these people, they end up uh, unknowingly or knowingly, they end up hurting us or our feelings. So, what happens is we don't get back the love. So, there is a sense of disappointment and anger. We feel extremely angry at them. What happens is we are angry, but we still love them, but still love is there. So, what happens is a state of confusion, the fancy name for which is a state of ambivalence. Now, when we are ambivalent or when we are confused and we don't know because we like the person but we're still not happy with what they did, what we may do is we may shout at them, we may be angry at them, we may withdraw ourselves, or what we may do is we may get hostile towards them. But we can often not express this anger, for example, towards our parents. So this is then directed towards ourself. What it means is we get angry for having expectations, we get angry for the unfulfilled expectations, and for not being able to express these. And we can often start blaming ourselves. For example, I am bad, or I deserve this. So these sort of negative emotions might start to occur. Now, this emotion and this anger, if this builds up, it grows and grows and grows and grows. These guys, Carl Abraham and this Freud, they said that it's like a pressure cooker system. If the pressure becomes too high, like in this situation, we might become aggressive or have very negative feelings about ourselves. And in the chronic state, this may lead to the condition in question, that is depression. Now, what is the problem with this system? What is the problem with this theory? So, first, it's not a pressure cooker system, right? And emotions have many ways of venting out. So we often go about talking about our emotions. We often express our emotions by something which we call displacement. We might sometimes start working and we might work off that energy and direct ourselves, and we might distract ourselves. So it's not always that this is a human who's in an isolated world and the anger keeps building up, building up, building up, and then suddenly everything explodes. We are social beings and we have the support of other people as well. So it's not usually that we're in an isolated system. So that doesn't hold true, that it's like a pressure cooker system. Secondly, not all people who are depressed who are depressed are necessarily angry with themselves or others. Some are, some may be angry with themselves or with the loved ones, but all are not. Uh, Also, often, if this is just the case, if it's just anger turned inwards, then what should happen is that there should be some the way to relieve depression or treatment should be just letting out anger, hitting someone, hitting yourself, harming yourself. But that's not the treatment of depression. Letting out anger is not the treatment of depression. So, again, this theory does not explain this as well. And lastly, there are simpler ways to think about depression. We don't have to be so complex, and we don't have to think about these invisible pressure cooker type systems. And weird ideas like emotional energy, thanatotic energy. We don't need to go to these complex ideas. We have more simpler solutions now and simpler ways to look at depression. Next theory, not as important as the last one. And the last one was important because of our master Sigmund Freud's name attached to it. So, object loss and how it relates to depression. So, what do we mean by this object loss? What is this object? So, especially in early, like infancy, the love figures, right? So, the parents, the siblings, or the caregivers. These would be the objects of what? Attachment. We'll learn about attachment theory later in some of our videos. So if there is like a, what we mean by object loss is, if let's say characteristically there's a traumatic um, separation. So maybe due to a calamity, maybe the death of a loved one, maybe separation of parents, something like this. But there has been a traumatic separation from the object, especially in the early childhood. All this will set the stage for depression. Now, whenever we talk about attachment, it's important to remember the name of the guy who has been named John Bowlby. He is the one who gave attachment theory, something again which we'll learn later on. So, there's a two-step hypothesis of how this object loss can lead to depression. So, first is that there was an early traumatic separation or an object loss in childhood. For example, a child was separated from the mother as the mother did not survive an accident, let's say. Right? And the child was very young. And so there occurs some what we call behavioral predispositions. Matlab, what this means is that the child will develop behavioral patterns like certain ways of seeing the world, evaluating it, or or certain ways of thinking about self, so self image. So these behavioral predispositions, which would be more in negative ways, right? So these behavioral predispositions would then sort of increase your chances of being a depressive when you're in your adulthood. And then comes the second step. Some critical event happens. For example, you are in a romantic relationship and there is a traumatic separation or there's a breakup. So these behavioral patterns or the ways of looking at the world, they get initiated because of what happened in the childhood to you, and this critical event happened in your childhood, in your adulthood, and you again are more predisposed to having depression. You fall back into the same patterns of thinking and behavior. Thus, the object loss that occurred much earlier in your life acts as a predisposition for depression. Again, it is still a widely accepted theory, but it has some drawbacks. One is that it is too specific, that specific object losses only will lead to depression. Of course, we know now that there are many risk factors, and object loss can of course be one of the risk factors. And also, in psychology and psychiatry and in general medicine, one is correlation, and one there's another thing called as causation. So correlation means that two things occur at the same time usually. For example, whenever I go out, this is my house. Whenever I go out, it starts to rain. So there's a correlation. Let's say every day, let's say 365, let's say 360 of the 365 days when I went out, it rained. So there is a correlation. You could still say so, but you can't say that just because I am going out, therefore it is raining. So a causation is not there. So we cannot say that object loss is the thing that is causing depression. It is something like a seesaw, that there is a predisposing, it is a predisposing or a risk factor, but it doesn't have to be or we don't know if it is a causating factor. Now, moving on to the third theory, that is loss of self-esteem and depression. What this basically says that when our ego, now there are many definitions of ego, but the simplest way of sort of thinking about it is the sense of self. What is our sense of self, right? So whenever our ego is deeply hurt, let's say by what someone did, or what happened, let's say by something we did actively, and whenever our ego is hurt, we feel that we have not lived up to our own expectations. We haven't lived up to our own expectations. So we feel that we have lost our sense of self, and we feel that we have lost, maybe it could be in the form of loss of power, that I do not have, or maybe that I do not have control over the situation or my surroundings, or maybe I do not have a strong sense of identity, or maybe I do not have a strong sense of purpose or meaning, any of these things. This leads to something which we like to call in fancy terms as narcissistic injury. Narcissistic injury. What this means is it's like a hit to the self-esteem. It's a blow to your self-esteem, right? Because you feel all this loss of power, control, identity, loss of purpose, loss of meaning in your life, and this is what then causes depression. Again, this theory has similar drawbacks like the previous one, because it does not explain all sorts of depression, and again there is a difference between causation and correlation. Right. Now, moving on, we have the cognitive theory of depression. So, this is the most important theory in depression, and it is also something which um, is most commonly we use in our day-to-day practice to explain depression to patients. So, the cognitive theory of depression, given by a guy named Aaron T. Beck. So he's given a lot of things. This theory says that depression happens because of negative thinking patterns or negative automatic thoughts, which are basically the way that a person interprets themselves. These are the ways that people interpret themselves, the world, and the future. So these negative automatic thoughts, they can also be called as cognitive distortions or depressogenic schemata. These are like mental filters, and these are shaped. What are they shaped by? Are your early life experiences, early or childhood experiences. So let's say if I was bullied by someone who belonged to a particular, who had a particular surname, or if I was bullied for having a particular trait in childhood, I will grow up to have these negative attitudes towards either myself or this particular, the particular people with this name, and I would end up having negative thoughts about these specific things. Right. Sorry. So, um, we had some early childhood experiences which were painful, which led to some depressogenic schemata or ways of thinking about the world, or thinking about ourselves, or thinking about the future, and they show us how they become the lens through which we see the world. So our glasses of how we see the world get colored by the early childhood experiences and the negative automatic thoughts that we have resulting from that. Therefore, when there have been some past bad experiences, or we have some negative automatic thoughts in a depressed state, there can be a cognitive triad in which, and this is the most important part of the theory, we can have negative views of ourself, negative views of the world, and negative views of the future. Something which we now call in fancy terms and to remember better as worthlessness, uh, helplessness, that no one will help us, everyone in the world is bad, and hopelessness, that even in the future things will not be okay. So together these create like a downward spiral that everything is bad in the world, and this leads to the both the onset as well as maintenance of this depression. So also what this theory says is that it is these negative automatic thoughts or our ways of thinking which lead to other symptoms of depression. So, for example, I feel that what is the point of getting up in the morning? And therefore, I then feel lethargic, or I feel that I do not have any motivation, or I feel that I just want to sleep for a long, long, long period of time. So it's according to this theory, the physical symptoms or how depression manifests in day-to-day lives come from these ways of thinking or these negative automatic thoughts. And this is basically what we focus on in cognitive therapy, which is one of the gold standards of depression treatment, where we work on these negative automatic thoughts or these cognitive distortions, and we try to break them one by one, uh, and try to replace them with good and better explanation of events and ways of thinking and patterns of thinking. So, um, very important thing here, sorry, is what are some of these cognitive distortions. So one of the most common things we'll see is all or none thinking. That is, either things are black or they are white, and there is no gray area. Either someone is very good, either they are very bad, there's no in between. So, for example, if someone says that if I'm not a total success, then I'm a failure. This sort of thinking puts a lot of pressure on the person and can obviously lead to depressogenic, increasing the depressive thoughts. Then catastrophizing. That is thinking the worst. So, for example, thinking that I will be so upset if, and I'll not be able to do anything at all if this so and so event doesn't go well, right? Then discounting the positives. So, not appreciating anything positive about any situation or anything about ourselves, and only focusing on negative events. For example, I did that project well, but that does not mean I'm competent. Maybe I just got lucky. Then emotional reasoning. So, sort of finding or basing your decisions or jumping to conclusions based on emotions. For example, I know I do a lot of things okay at work, but I feel like I'm a failure, and then feeling like I'm a failure, and then actually believing that, oh, I am actually a failure, and letting that affect our work. Then magnification and magnification. So either increasing something to a sort of level where which it is actually not true, or minimizing, let's say, a big achievement that you had. Let's say you won a TEDx award, but you minimize it and think, oh, it's nothing big, or you failed a test and you think it's the end of your life. Then selective abstraction. So what this is, or an as per CTP, it is also called a mental filter. So what this means is that you pay undue attention to the one negative detail. If there is a picture and everything is okay, 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 everything is happening okay, and then there's this one thing, sorry, okay, okay, and there's this one small thing which is wrong with, let's say, a situation, we will only and only magnify and um, sort of think about this one detail. Then there is mind reading, that I know what they are thinking about me, I know what she's going to say, I know she thinks I am not a good person, I know she doesn't like me. Then overgeneralization. If this thing happened with me, everything is going to be bad now. Or because I felt uncomfortable in the meeting, I don't have what it takes to make friends. Making these big, large assumptions based on small individual events. And then there's the should and must statements, that I should be perfect, I must do these things properly. If I must always never make a mistake, I must be pin and proper, and I must always do this and do that. And then there's tunnel vision. So what this means is, for example, you only see the negative aspects of a situation, again not looking at the whole picture, but only looking through a small and negative aspect of it. For example, my son's teacher cannot do anything right. He's critical and insensitive and lousy at teaching, just because he scolded the son at one incident and not the rest of the year when things were happy and gay. All right. Now coming to the last two theories. So this is an important one, but also an important one which we used in therapy, which is learned helplessness, given by the guy Martin Seligman. He had a famous experiment where he kept dogs inside a cage, and first he gave them electric shocks, and he did not let them escape, even when they were getting these shocks, and even if they tried moving about the cage, but they could not move out. So later on, in after a lot of trials, if even if let's say the gate was open and then the shocks were levered, the dogs would be so hopeless and feel that they are helpless, and they had learned that there is help, that no matter what they do, they will not be able to move out of this cage, that they did not move, and they stayed still. So what this, so beautiful line explains what this theory says, that so learned helplessness basically is a belief that it is futile to initiate personal action to reverse aversive stimuli. This kind of explains it all. And where we see it as is that a lot of people who are depressed, they do not have a sense of control in their lives, or they don't think that they can help themselves, and rather helplessness is and hopelessness both are very high predictors of suicidality as well. Suicidality as well. So uh, what we tell clients in therapy is that a sense of mastery of the environment or sense of control of the environment, once we are able to get them to this point, we see a significant decrease in the symptoms of depression, and more sense of control over the depressive symptoms and the cognitive schemata also that the patients have. And the last theory, which is sort of the behavioral theory of depression, Peter Levinson said a few things about this aspect of depression, where according to him it was more of a, it could be explained by the behavioral psychology. So he said a few things. One is that if depression occurred because there were lack of appropriate rewards, so you did a lot of work, you contributed and you gave it all, but there was no reward for your work. You were not recognized and you were not given the compensation for it, or you were maybe, let's say, told that you should do better and no acknowledgement was given. Then it could lead to a sense of not having any meaning, or feeling like a failure, or having undeserved rewards, feeling that whatever I've got is not something that I deserve, or it has not happened because of what I have done. It has just been given to me. So undeserved or unproportionate rewards. And also having poor social skills. So if someone has poor social skills, they would automatically lead to less interactions, and if they have less interactions, they will have less opportunity for any sort of reinforcement. No one will be able to appreciate you if you don't start a conversation or if you don't tell them anything about yourself. So therefore there are less rewards. If there are less rewards, then there is a depressive state that can start. So based on this, we use this knowledge to how it helps us in therapy is that we work on social skills, we work on rewards which match the actions. For example, in children, we reward them appropriately for what they have done. We don't overpraise them, we don't underpraise them, etc. So these are some of the theories of depression, and the most important ones out of these is are the ones that I had star marked. So the first one, that is aggression turned inwards model. It's not very valid right now, but it's often tested in standard tests. Then the cognitive model of depression and the learned helplessness model. And all of the content of this video is from the comprehensive textbook of psychiatry, Kaplan's 11th edition. Sorry, 10th edition. Thank you. Thank you.